All right, so welcome to our session. Thank you everybody for sharing your Saturday with us, and we are so happy to have you with us. Our session today is on phonological awareness and how that impacts readers and writers. My name is Diana Palacios. I am from San Antonio, Texas. I've been teaching for almost 20 years. It's hard to say that sometimes, but yeah, almost 20 years. I've taught pre-K, I've taught first, second, fourth grade. I've been a dyslexia teacher for several years. I was a dyslexia teacher for several years. And I worked as a district specialist at one of our local school districts. And now I kind of work as like a literacy coach all around the city of San Antonio. So I have a very lucky and wonderful job. I'm so blessed, I have to say. Today with me, I have Quinn. Gwen, you want to talk a little bit about
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am so happy to be here as well. So yeah, my name is Quinn, and I'm from Horsham, Pennsylvania, but I work in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, and I'm a primary grade literacy coach. And prior to this year, I just was doing this work this year, so it's all exciting and new for me. Prior to this year, I was a first grade teacher, and I did some work in also third grade. So in my spare time, I'm currently working on my doctorate in cognitive studies in reading. Thank you. So I love taking a break, doing some kind of work like this. It's very exciting to be here with all of you.
Great. Well, this is my first webinar, and so it feels really weird not having people to talk to, but I can talk to just about anything and anyone, so this should be fairly easy for me. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at phonological awareness and some particular aspects of phonological awareness. So our very next slide is something you call the literacy wheel. And when we talk about the literacy wheel, I think of learning to read and to write, kind of like riding a bike. And if you have a bike with a flat tire, it's really hard to ride. And the same thing with our literacy wheel. There are a lot of aspects that make up a reader and a writer. And so there's the oral language component. In oral language, it's not just your receptive and your expressive language skills. It also has to do with the vocabulary that you have and that you know. And I like to fill in phonological awareness in this area because it's an auditory skill. We also have phonics and word study, and some people put phonological awareness in this little area of the wheel as well, but it doesn't matter. Whichever little area that you put it in, they impact each other. And I like looking at this way because no matter what, if I just teach phonological awareness or if I just teach one aspect, I'm not teaching everything else, then children's literacy wheel, it does not fully inflate. And if a fully inflated literacy wheel is needed for a smooth acquisition for reading and writing, right? And so we have to nurture and nourish all these different parts. And so along with the phonics, our letter sounds and all those things that come along with that, and word study, the vocabulary piece as well, the written vocabulary and the morphological aspects of words. So that goes into that. So teaching them that. But then we have, I worked at a district where we used building blocks in kindergarten. And what I took away was, the different types of reading we do with children all across the day. We read aloud books. We read to kids, right? We read aloud, we think aloud, kind of modeling what higher language structures sound like, what higher level text sound like, what it means like to read with fluency and prosody. As well as we read with children through shared reading. In kinder and first grade, we do a lot of big books, reading with big books. And, we look at concepts of print and how to process words and learning those word processing strategies and how to decode that and how all that works. And then we have reading by children, which can be two different aspects. If you do guided reading, then kids are reading books at their level. And they're reading it, but you're kind of guiding them through the hard parts, that if they have any, and getting them to think and talk through that. And then the independent reading that children do by themselves, right? And we talked about, I know in an earlier session that Elsa Galindo and Lisa Stone did, they talked about choice and kids having a choice of what to read. So all of those different types of readings have to be going on as well. And then we have writing. So children look at teachers modeling writing. So the teacher models writing and the thinking, like kind of like a read aloud, but a write aloud. And then writing with children, that's when we participate more in that shared writing and the interactive writing, where as a collective group in shared writing, we're constructing a message, and the teacher's writing, and then interactive writing, where children are taking hold of the pen and joining in the writing and creation of composing something together. Again, that's all kind of scaffolding, leading the way, building the bridge to being able to write independently. And so they all work together. So all of these, and if we look at that literacy wheel, there's a part of every piece of that literacy wheel that touches the other. And that, I think, is what's really important, is how all of these things, how oral language, how phonological awareness, how vocabulary impacts phonics, how it impacts reading, how it impacts writing. And so that all is related. And it's the art of teaching, the art of the skillful teacher is to be able to put it all together in meaningful ways in context. So that way it all connects and clicks. And we have a nice fully inflated wheel for children so they can learn to read and write efficiently and easily, and that's what we want. So if we look at the next skill, we're going to hone in today on just that one little piece of the oral language part, which is phonological awareness. It's just one tiny little aspect in this huge wheel, but it's truly important. It's a foundation for strong readers and writers. When we look at what the definition, it is an auditory skill, like I said, and it has to do with children having an understanding of the spoken sounds in language and what we hear. And it occurs before children learn to read and write, and before they learn to actually connect it to letter sounds. They have to hold those sounds in their head, and it's highly related to reading and writing success. And Gwen is going to take us through some of the research and what the research says about that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Diana. So when I was examining phonological awareness and how it affects children who are learning a second language, such as English, I found that research suggests the importance of explicit phonological awareness instruction for English learners, just as English natives. In fact, in many cases, having a second language actually had a positive correlation in becoming adept in phonological awareness in English. And recent research suggests that phonological awareness actually generalizes across languages. So having a strong foundation in one language will help and influence the attainment of phonological awareness in the new language. One really important thing to note for the classroom and for teachers' understanding is the recognition that if an English phoneme, which a phoneme is the smallest unit of sound, so if the recognition of an English phoneme doesn't exist in a child's native language, or maybe there's an English phoneme that is very close to a child's language phoneme, the child may have some difficulty in phonological awareness in English. So it's the teacher's role to recognize that and to be able to provide that explicit instruction to support that child and the child's needs. In fact, there's many resources out there that are available to teachers to help you clarify what English phonemes are not or does not exist in other languages. So I found that to be very helpful. And there is also a profound amount of research that supports the idea that children who have the understanding that spoken words are composed of small units of sound, and if they're able to manipulate those sounds with such as segmentation, and Diana's going to talk about that in a little bit, and blending, they're generally more successful in the beginning stages of learning to read and write. So versus children who lack that understanding. So it's extremely crucial for children to have that understanding going forward. And this notion also leads to the idea that children who have a solid understanding that words and syllables can be broken down into smaller units of sound will be more adept at the understanding that sounds in spoken words can then therefore be represented by letters in printed words. And Marilyn Adams, in Beginning to Read, highlights this understanding. She states that the relationship between sounds and letters is thought to be one of the fundamental tasks facing the beginning reader and writer. And in terms of reading difficulties, children who experience difficulty in learning to read tend to also lack the understanding of phonological awareness. So if we can help provide experiences for them to build that phonological awareness, it should intend help them acquire reading skills. So that is the research that I found.
Thank you, Gwen. One thing I did forget to note at the onset was just if you're following us on Twitter, make sure that you use the hashtag the EdCollabGathering and then a space and number 14. We are session number 14. So if you want to tweet us, I'm trying to keep an eye on tweets that are coming in. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them, and we will try to have a little 10-minute or so, maybe if we can get through it, to answer some of your questions regarding phonological awareness in the classroom. But on the next slide, we're gonna see different terms that we use in phonological awareness, or when we're talking about phonological awareness. And one of them is talk about cracking the alphabetic code. And in order to crack that code, you know, I read in W. Miller's book, reading is caught, not taught. Like, how do you catch on? It's a whole slew of skills that are involved. The metacognitive, the going back, and the knowledge that we have, what we have, our background knowledge, right? What connections we make, in addition to how we understand, what we understand about letters and letter sounds and being able to put them all together. So it's a huge thing. So cracking the code, there's a lot of things that are involved in that. This is one small piece that helps kids crack that code. And so looking at some of the terms, we have phonological awareness that we talked about. It's kind of like the umbrella term that helps us kids focus on reflecting on sounds, being able to manipulate the components of those spoken words, and it develops on a continuum. That's something important. It starts from the easiest things. It starts right about 3 years old, and it works its way all the way up. Typically by an age of 9, children are fully developed in the area of phonological awareness. And I've been studying the different state standards and just kind of looking at the different state standards. And it's interesting that a lot of states past first grade, there are no phonological awareness standards, but it doesn't fully develop till kids are 9 years old. And I have worked with 5th graders who struggle with multisyllabic words and finding the syllables in multisyllabic words and being able to apply that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, because I think that's really powerful stuff. Then we have the term phonemic awareness. A lot of times people use these two terms, phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, interchangeably, but really they're not. Phonemic awareness deals with individual units of sound, and like Gwen was talking about earlier, when we segment and blend individual sounds, that gives us more bang for our buck, and we'll look at some strategies for that in a little bit later on as well. And then we have the term phonics. A lot of teachers use these interchangeably, like phonological and phonics, and they kind of mix those up. Phonics actually refers to the visual representation, the graphic visual representation of a letter. So I could be doing phonological awareness, and as soon as I put a letter down, write up that on paper where kids can see it, that becomes phonics. That's the phonics part. So that's how you differentiate that. If we were probably in a room right now, I would give you some cards and scenarios, and you'd have to sort what phonological awareness is and what phonics is, and you'd be able to sort those out. The next term we have there is phoneme, and the phoneme is the smallest unit of meaningful sound. So it can't be like just a guttural sound. It has to be a meaningful sound, like b and p, right? And then the last thing we're going to talk about on this particular slide, but we're going to go into it a little bit more deeply later, is phonetics. And that's the study of the actual speech sounds, how sounds are articulated in your mouth, and how that's important and how that relates to phonemic awareness, because believe it or not, it has a direct implication. And we'll talk about that in a couple of different slides. So on the next slide, we'll see, you know, your typical phonological awareness slide. With the umbrella term as phonological awareness is, and so we have on there wordplay. And when we talk about wordplay, that is when kids are just singing and clapping and moving to rhymes and alliterative songs and finger plays. And then we have sentence segmentation. This is really important that actually begins to develop right around the time that kids are about 3 years old, when they start getting, that starts on that continuum starts right there. But it doesn't fully develop. I've seen some struggling second grade writers who are still not fully developed in sentence segmentation. They can't hear the word boundaries in the sentence they're thinking about, and so they can't apply that to their writing. So it's really, really important to develop these things, because you know, they have to hear those word boundaries when they're putting their words down on paper. Then we have syllable play, and that's, so we've gone down from word play when we're talking about songs and books and stories, to then sentence segmentation, when we're taking one part of, you know, the sentence part of whatever we're singing or reading, and we're trying to segment that out to the actual word, and then within the word being able to chop that into all the big, larger units of sound called syllables. And then we have phonemic awareness, and where that starts at, when we start kids with onset rhyme, like k, at, and we've isolated the k sound from the rhyme at. That is the very first time they get, that's the first start of phonemic awareness. And then they go into blending the phonemes, segmenting phonemes, manipulating phonemes. And when I talk about manipulating phonemes, we're talking about being able to isolate a sound and then being able to substitute it, or change it, or delete it, or something in that effect to change the word. And so again, it develops on a continuum, and the last ones to develop are those individual blending and segmenting and deleting and being able to change that and play with those words. And again, I said that typically is fully developed by the age of 9, but if they don't have good instruction in it in K1, 2, like I said, I have worked with children in 4th and 5th grade that struggle in those areas, those big gaps in their understanding of word sounds. Going to the next slide. So we'll look at some key components of phonological awareness, and we kind of looked at that in the umbrella of segmenting, deleting, substituting, and blending. So these are the major components of phonological awareness. And while I did talk about using that in like with phonemic awareness, with the individual phonemes, it actually starts a little bit earlier than that. And earlier this week, I was in a classroom, and a child in a kindergarten classroom was asked to rhyme a word, throw in a rhyming word, produce or generate a rhyming word. And they struggled, and it was just like silence. So it was like, well, ask a buddy, right? Who's going to help, who can help him come up with the word? But it really got me thinking about, you know, we take for granted rhyming is such an easy thing. Well, of course it's easy. You know, I have 40 plus years experience rhyming words, and I have a lot of knowledge. And actually, when I think of rhyming words and you tell me, you know, Diana, can you rhyme something with cat? Well, of course, because in my head, I see all these words in addition to knowing the words, right? And so the kids don't have that knowledge like we do. And so on the next slide, we're going to kind of take apart what kids do to produce a rhyme. So again, the first step is in order to produce a rhyme. So let's say we're looking at the word hat. We look at the word hat, and I say, okay, boys and girls, can you give me a word that rhymes with hat? The first thing they have to do is they have to segment the word but into its onset and its rhyme. So I have and at. So I've segmented it, right? Now I have to delete the sound, and then I just have at. Then I have to substitute another sound, maybe and then I have to blend that together, and I make rat. And really, that was a very that was a deconstructed process of how children generate and produce rhymes. And they had to do all that in their head. And it's actually a very difficult skill. So if you still have kindergartners who are not rhyming, that's probably the reason why, because they haven't figured that out yet. And so the way they're going to do that is through a lot of practice with you. I'm trying to read the notes here. So when we ask children to generate rhymes, it's not as easy for them as it is for us. So just think about that the next time that you're asking kids to generate rhymes. If they're struggling, that's probably the reason why they're not seeing that in their head. They're not able to delete and substitute and blend those words, substitute the letters to make the other rhyme. On the next page, we have on the next slide, we have a note on phonetics. So we talked about phonetics as the study of where sounds are articulated in your mouth and how that's really important. So when I taught 4th grade, I had a student, and the year that he was in my classroom, he struggled. He struggled with writing. He's a super smart kid, but the writing piece just, that was a struggle for him. And I remember one of the words that when we were doing writing conferences, one of the words that he wrote had like a ton of extra U's in it. And I wasn't sure, like, what is this word? So, I asked him to read it to me, and we found out that the word was channel. Now, so he was changing the channel on the TV, and that's what he was writing about. And so I asked him, I'm like, well, let's sound this word out. Like, I just wanted to hear how he heard it. And he she said, ch, a, n, o, right? So then when he wrote it, like I asked him, well, how do you spell n? And he would say, N-U. Like, he heard that extra sound. So as teachers, it's really important that when we're teaching letter sounds, that we make sure we clip out those extra sounds, and we're not putting extra sounds in letters, in the phonemes, because we don't want to get kids knowing the wrong letter sounds. And he would write like ch was C-H-U. Anything that had an L, he'd write L-U. Like, it took a long time to get rid of that habit of taking out the U, because he heard it and he was really trying really hard. I think he just overgeneralized the use of that, but still somewhere along the line, he was taught that L says L and M says M and N says N, and it doesn't. We have to be really clear and really distinct with those letter sounds and articulate them in the right place, but make sure we clip off the extra sounds. So when we say we say n. If we say b, to me, those are the hardest because they have the puff of air. Those are really important things to consider, is make sure you clip those sounds off. And that way the kids learn the right sound for that phoneme. Also, some things that kids get tripped up on. Kids get stuck. Again, I was working with a student the other day, and he was writing and he was confusing E and I. And the reason that is because those are produced very similar, very similar to each other in the mouth, E, I. And a good way to do that, thanks to my wonderful linguistics professor in college. I loved that linguistics class, but the E and the E is a vowel, and all long vowels and short vowels, it's hard. Like, they have nothing to do with length. Long vowels are not long vowels because you can say them longer, and short vowels are not short vowels because you can say them shorter. That's not it. I don't know who termed them that, but the reason the difference between long vowels and short vowels is in the stress of the vocal cords. So it's just like constant airflow that's undisrupted. And we say A, and if you do that with me right now, luckily you're at home, nobody can see you. So say A, you feel right here that your neck muscles get tight, right? A, E, I, O, U, right? It's tight. Now try saying the short vowel sounds, right? A, E, I, A. Do you feel that difference? You feel that difference because the short vowels, our muscles are relaxed, they're taking it easy, but with the long vowel sounds, they are stressed and it's tight right here. So if you have kids who are confusing the E and the I, you can very easily show them this little trick. Is it I or E? Like, where do you feel it? I or E? Like, do you feel it tight here? So getting them to hear that. Some the other vowel sounds that are really tricky and can get confusing for kids is the ah and the eh, because if you try to pronounce those, ah, eh, it's just a little bit, your mouth is a little bit more open, ah, eh, than the other one. And so if kids are struggling with that, make sure that they are pronouncing it right and have them make those two sounds, maybe using a mirror and looking at themselves so they can see the position of their mouth. Also, a note on just consonant sounds. Some that get confused very often is the D and the T. Those two letters get confused, and you'll see the kids will write a T for the D sound. And the reason that is because those two letters are made in the exact same position of your mouth. So I want you to, with me, I would like for you to pretend like you're going to make the D sound. Ready? Don't make a sound. Just put your mouth in that position. You're going to say, all right? Now I want you to do the same thing. And this time I want you to make the T sound. Don't make a sound. Just get your mouth ready to say it. Ready? What did you notice? You probably noticed that they're in the same position, right? They're in the same position. The difference there is one is voiced and one is unvoiced. And the way you can tell whether they're voiced or not is a voiced sound will give you a little tickle right here when you say it. So I want you to say t. You feel anything? Probably not. All right, now say d. Do you feel that little tickle? That little tickle, it shows you that that's a voiced sound. So those are important in helping kids. A lot of times you just need that little bit of guidance there. To me, this is a fascinating sound. And then the last thing that we're going to touch on, and there's other letters that are made in the same position of the mouth, except one is voiced and one is unvoiced. You have your f and v. They're made in the exact same position, except one tickles and one doesn't. So, and there's others. The last thing I'm going to talk about is just having taught first grade for several years. And every time I taught first grade, I would lose my voice. And the reason is because kinder and first graders are always sick. Like once they get to second grade, they're not as sick as much. But when they're in kinder and first grade, they get sick a lot and people have stuffy noses. I live in San Antonio, and there's always some type of allergen out here, and everybody's nose is always stuffed, adults too. But this brings me to our nasal sounds. We have some sounds that we use that are made using your nose. So I want you to say mm. All right, I want you to say mm, but this time I want you to hold your nose when you're saying it. Ready? I want you to see what happens. Ready? Can you make that mm sound? Nope, you can't. The next one I want you to try is mm. Ready? Go. Could you make that sound? Nope, you couldn't. And the reason is because those are nasal sounds. Now think of our kids when they're writing the word jump. I remember looking at kids writing, a lot of times they would spell jump, J-U-P. Why? Because they didn't hear the sound in jump because their noses were stuffy, whether they were sick or just allergies, whatever. But so that's important for them to know that and to hear that, so that way you can kind of pinpoint this is the reason why they don't get that sound, as that's important. If they can't hear the sound, they can't produce the sound, then how can they play with those sounds, right? So we focused a little bit on this particular aspect. And then now we're going to go into, it is 1:30, we're going to go into some activities that you can directly do. So we're going to the next two slides. You can go to the next one. Thank you, Brittany. All right, so I just have to do a little touch up on this particular one. Well, this one, if you're still having kindergarten kids that are first graders that are not recognizing rhymes, a good strategy to try is use like a nursery rhyme that they're already familiar with and change up the words. So I went with Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to jump. If they can't rhyme, they won't recognize that those are the same. But the more, because they've heard the rhyme several times before, they're going to go, no, that's not how it goes, right? And so by changing it up, then you can bring that attention to, hey, look, these rhyming words, they sound the same at the end. And so helping them recognize that is the very first step into rhyming. So use your nursery rhymes. Jack and Jill went up the road to get a pail of water. Like, whoa, that's not how it goes, teacher. They'll probably say something like that. And rhyming is very important. It's not just a fun way. It's not just something that entertains us. It exposes children to the rhythm of language. It teaches them how to phrase words together, helps them understand the patterns and the structures of spoken and written language. And later when they're learning to read or they're trying to read rhyming stories, it helps them better be able to decode new words that they are learning. One of my favorite activities comes on the very next slide. It's called rounding up rhymes. And rounding up rhymes is a really great strategy to use with your kids. The first time that you read a book, and anytime you read a rhyming book to kids, you want to read it just for pleasure, for fun. I've heard it. Go through it. Don't mess up the book by stopping and doing anything with it. Just listen to it. Let them enjoy it. Then on the subsequent read of the book, you can take out. So like this is one of my favorite books, Mouse Mess. It's one of my favorite rhyming books. It's just such an adorable picture book. And it's been by Lene Riley, but there's other picture books as well. And if you're on Twitter and you want to share some of your favorite rhyming books, you can do that. Just don't forget, it's the EdCollabGathering, space number 14, hashtag number 14. So if you want to share some, that'd be great. But you take the book like Mouse Mess, and after you read it the first time, the next time you come to it, and depending on what grade level you are, if you're in kindergarten, I probably would do this over a couple of days. In first grade and second grade, they're probably a little bit more able to do some things on the same day. They have their attention spans are a little bit longer. But what you would do is you would read the story, and you would come back and do like a closed reading and have them give you the other rhyming word. And then what your goal is going to be is you're going to take out like what are the words that rhyme. And you don't want to do the whole book. You want to just pick 4 to 5 rhyming patterns that rhyme and that don't. So I took some words from the story. So in the story, flows and toes rhymes. We have bed and fed rhyme, and we have around and found that rhyme. And we have one more, actually took out 4, out and about that rhyme. While I know that this is now the phonics piece, it's not enough just to do the rhyme, but you have to do the transfer piece as well to get that phonics to stick. But then you can also build that word knowledge. So that way, when you ask them to generate rhymes, they know how to do it because you've practiced it, right? And so I would look at this one and I would say, look, these are not, they don't have the same, they sound the same at the end, but they don't have the same spelling pattern. So I'm not going to use this particular one. And I would like tear it up for visual effect. But then from here, then I could make other words. So I have out and about, look, they look the same. On maybe another day or later on, I could go back and let's make some more words. So now we can generate some words that have the out spelling pattern, and the same thing goes with the other ones. And then later, once you make your long list, then you can also go back and read them. And that way, the next time you're standing in line getting ready for lunch, you can say, hey, let's make some words that rhyme with bed and fed. And now they can generate some of those rhymes because they have those words in their vocabulary. Let's see. Going on to rounding up rhymes, we're going to go into sentence segmenting and blending. I told you we'd look at some activities for that. And so if we go to the next slide, Brittany, thank you, ma'am. So the letters IWTTM, when I taught first grade, one of my students, and he was one of my gifted and talented, he's such a smart young man. But when he was in first grade, this is what he wrote, IWTTM. And I was like, okay, why don't you read your writing to me? And so he told me that I went to the movies. And so that's what that meant. So he didn't have, he knew the initial sounds of words, but he wasn't able to put down the rest of the sounds in the words, and he didn't have word boundaries. He didn't hear the word boundaries within each word. And so when we talk about segmenting and blending sentences, we can do things. It's really easy. I like to use blocks in the classroom, but blocks were really hard to show up on the computer without being ungraceful. So I'm going to use sentence strips, just cut up to show that. So like if I'm working with the kids and we said, I went to the movies, I would use the sentence strips or the blocks, and I'd say, I went to the movies. That one might be a little bit long for other kids, but I like pizza. So that would be a good one here. That way they start to see, oh, look, no words. It's all phonological awareness, right? So no words yet, but I can say, I like pizza. Later, what you can do is you can make like use different length blocks. So short words get a smaller block and long words get a longer block, but that way they can see that. And if I were using blocks, I would tape on a sentence strip or an index card on it, so then I could write words on the cards later. So that way they can actually apply the writing, right? It's good to do it in isolation, but then we have to teach them how to apply it in their writing. And so this is a great way to do that. Again, use blocks. You can tape these on there. You can make it as easy as using sentence strips. It doesn't have to be hard. I just put a magnetic strip on the back and did that. And so if they can do a 3-word sentence easily, then you can increase it, the text complexity by adding another word to there. Let's see, another way that you can practice that is with a ball. And so like if you get like a beach ball and you have like, I like pizza with your partner, if you're sitting on the floor, you can roll the ball to each other. And in the act of rolling the ball to each other, for every word you say, I, roll the ball. Love, roll the ball. The pizza, roll the ball. You're helping them like find that word boundary. And so the rolling the ball kind of makes it a little bit slower and slows the process down. And so that's another quick, easy thing that you can do. So using the blocks, making the ball. Remember, phonological awareness is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be something like total physical response, something I can manipulate with my hands. That's why I have been kind of like, here's how you can use sentence strips or blocks to segment sentences and words. It has to be, you have to give them because it's hard to hold sounds in your head. Looking at my time, 1:38. Another important one there is on the next slide is segmenting syllables. And this one's real important because later they're going to learn how to spell using syllabication rules. And if they know like open syllables and closed syllables, they can figure out what letters to put down there. But being able to segment syllables into their parts is really important. And so sticky notes are a great thing. So if kids ask you how do you spell this word, especially starting in first grade, even kindergarten, you want to help them sound out. But when they're doing multisyllabic words, using a sticky note, and let's say motorcycle was one of the boys in my class loved cars and motorcycles. So that motorcycle was a frequent word. So I would say, well, let's sound out how many syllables, motorcycle. And then we get a sticky note for every syllable. And then they'd have to sound out every syllable. Mo. Oh, it's an open syllable. So the O says its name, tur. And then, what letters say tur, and then put that all the way down. And it wasn't spelled exactly right, but they had all the syllables of the word. And that's what's important. Later on, they can learn the spelling rules. But here's where you anchor it down. I hear all those syllable parts. And some other things you can do is just look at pictures and sort them by how many syllables does it have, 1, 2, 3, or 4 syllables. And so we'll go on to the next one. We'll skip that next slide, the next 2 slides, and we're going to get into one more slide. Thank you. And so then we're going to look at segmenting and blending phonemes. And I love to use little sound boxes. These are super cool. This you can use during shared writing, interactive writing, so that way kids can sound out words when they're writing at their whole group. But also it's great to use in guided reading groups, like before they're going to start to read, to go back and kind of sound out words and play with words that they might be reading about. But using these, so if I say, let's sound out gum, I would take a phoneme, I'm using these little foam counters, and I just put a little magnet on the back of them. I like to represent my consonants and vowels by different colors. In this case, I'm just going to make that these red ones are consonants and my white ones are vowels, but you can do whatever you want. If you have yellow ones, that's fine too. So if I sound out gum, g, and so where's the vowel? Here's the vowel in white, it's a different color. If you want to double it, and it's kind of like a little 10 frame for math, you can use the same, it's a multi-use strategy. But like, let's say I want to make the word church later on, and I say ch, ch. And then I can actually write the letter sounds down here. What letters say ch, ch? What letters say ur? What letters say ch, church? And then they'll see, oh, look, these 6 letters make 3 sounds. So it's really cool and how to tie these in. This is really easy, really powerful. This is going to give you the most bang for your buck with spelling and decoding and encoding for writing. So good strategy, very simple that you can use. And with that, I just want to show the next slide. Let's skip that slide too. And so one thing, phonological awareness should be really fun and engaging throughout the day. And one thing that if you don't plan it, it's not going to happen. As I see that very often, that it's not happening, and everybody knows how important it is. So Gwen is going to talk to us a little bit about assessment when it comes in turn.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. Wow, so many great ideas. I can't wait to use some of those in my own classrooms. Just one thing I just want to mention about assessment. One thing that even though we're talking about the spoken sounds of the language, we can actually use children's writing, right, to figure out if they have that establishment, if they have phonological awareness and even phonemic awareness, just by looking at a child's writing. So for example, if a child were to write the word jot, and the word jot is not in their committed memory, so they're using their sound system to go ahead and map out those letters. If they were able to use 3 phonemes or 3 graphemes in their writing, that indicates to us that they have that phonemic awareness because they're doing 3 discrete sound symbols for that. So that just looking at children's writing is a real authentic way to gather that information. You could also do a primary spelling inventory if you're not familiar with Words Their Way. A spelling inventory is similar to a traditional spelling test, except the words are not studied. You know, it's just a capture and isolation of what they do know, and it could help inform your instruction for children. And then as far as wordplay, I love how Diana used all of those different game-like things that we do with kids, and kids just love them. You know, whether they have the phonemic awareness or not, they're just going to love it. And it's especially helpful if they do not have that understanding yet. So that's my end. I really wanted to open up for questions and comments. One question was regarding if there were if there were any specific phonological awareness programs that you could recommend.
For older kids, I see that
for
older kids. There are some programs I'm really leery about. I don't want you to have to go buy something, but just thinking about how it develops on a continuum. The things that you could do, the syllabication, like do they hear those sounds in multisyllabic words, especially for 5th graders? This is for older students, so I'm going to say 3rd, 4th, 5th probably. The things that work with them is really helping them hear those the syllables in the word, and then tying that in the syllabication spelling rules and connecting that. That is very powerful. The morphological, like when the morphological, I can't say it, aspects to the words, like what the prefixes and suffixes and root words mean. That is very powerful. And then, you know, I've seen that a lot with the kids I've worked with, that once you start teaching them, like the shun and like if we're going to look at transportation and look at that as the word trans means to move, right? support, and then the shun, if you teach them the meanings of those words, that helps them to start spelling in like chunks and see words in chunks, and that really helps them the most. Because by fifth grade, they should not be spelling like sound by sound. They should be like chunking, like, oh, these go together, these go together. But some instruction on the syllabication rules and the syllable patterns, spelling patterns, very powerful. Really, like you have R-controlled vowels. What are they? Vowel teams. What are they? Final stable syllables. What are they? Those really help older students.
Mm-hmm. And there was another question. How long do I implement phonological awareness activities? Like how long in the day should it be happening?
I'd say about 20 minutes. And you see, it's not like you're going to spend like a whole 20-minute time of your day teaching phonological awareness, because you think of transitions and when I can put them in. So if we're lining up for lunch, we might hop the syllables of our name, or we might blend phonemes, or we might segment phonemes by jumping on a 5-frame that's built on the floor out of tape. So little things like that. It's singing songs, it's singing rhymes. It's I heard a teacher the other day, she was like, I'm thinking about my sh-oo. And the kid said shoe. And so they were just walking in line. And so they weren't necessarily quiet, but it was a controlled quiet that they had. And I just wanted to touch real quick on the author of Mouse Mess. Again, this has been my favorite book for years. I love this book. It's by Lene Riley. If you're interested, it's just so adorable. And it has good spelling patterns. So if you want to use that one, please do.
Mm-hmm. And also one of our Twitter followers said Hop on Pop is a sure favorite of hers.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Classic. You always get a lot of good rhymes from those, especially for the younger kids. All right. I don't think we have any other questions. I think we're about 2 minutes over, but I would like to thank you so very much for joining us on this beautiful Saturday. It's a little rainy out here in San Antonio today, so it's a good time to stay in. Hopefully you can join us for our closing session. And thank you guys so much. If you have any questions, keep asking those questions. I can keep responding on Twitter if you want to. I'm at Diana Palacios 48. Not because that's how old I am, but that's my favorite race car driver. And so hopefully he never retires because I have that 48 to my name. But anyway, if you want to shoot me or Gwen a text or a tweet, please do so. We can answer those questions for you.
Thank you so much, Diana.
Have a great Saturday. Thanks, Gwen. It was great working.
You too.
Thank you, ladies, so much. Again, I hope that Ray stays tuned and joins us for the closing session to end out such an amazing day. Social action and social media changing the world through student voice. You guys are doing amazing work. Thank you, ladies, so much. And goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.